that leads to the next question. How was Rutherford appointed unanimously? What's the history behind that?
Well, Macmillan was
Macmillan?
he was chairman, and he only admitted Rutherford to be nominated. And I mean, he didn't allow Ritchie to be nominated. But how on earth could it be? I mean, he was vice president, and the Brooklyn Daily Eagle had said, well, he most likely will be president. So how could he not be nominated?
It is almost standard in a company. The vice president is the most qualified to take over.
Yeah. But Macmillan didn't want him to be. He wanted Rutherford, and he wanted to be. There shouldn't be any competition with him. Well, I'm sure that Ritchie got a number of votes. Of course, as vice president, he would win, but he didn't. And they removed. They arranged for that. The claim, the statement in the charter that it should be by ballot was removed. They just rejected that.
So they wouldn't take any more nominations.
It's stated even in the Watchtower report that the notion of using the ballot was laid aside. They didn't use that, so they never counted the votes. The votes were never counted,
and they wouldn't take other nominations. Correct.
And he didn't. Macmillan, he didn't recognize any other. If there were, he realized there were people who would nominate other people, but he managed to reject that. So he was the only one nominated. And he had various people, come with all kinds of suggestions. And that was also prearranged, of course. So in the end, it was only Rutherford who was nominated. So all the votes were counted for him.
And we haven't even gotten to the sisters yet with the votes and their voting shares. So we haven't even really hit that. It's just, it's not.
Well, Rutherford, he was clever. He saw to it that they were eliminated beforehand.
How did he do that?
Well, he argued with the board, and that was before the election, very early. He argued that, well, he cannot give his votes to Five Sisters or to anyone else because his votes would die with him. And he arranged for, and the board agreed that he could send for a legal opinion. And he, of course, got a legal opinion. A legal opinion can say anything you want. And he got a legal opinion that these shares couldn't be transferred to anyone after his death. So, and they agreed then not to use them. He fooled them.
Yeah, because he was planning to take over.
I deal with that in my book, and my view is that that was foul, and Russell wasn't that stupid. He of course, and they had voted his shares for a number of years already, and he could. But Rutherford at the time could not be sure about those votes. There were, at that time his votes were a minority, but even so, a significant minority. They could be used against him, or so to speak, or for another. So he saw to that they were never used at the election. And that helped him.
What was your opinion of the Rutherford lawyers and their view of the law?
There was only one lawyer that he brought a legal opinion. I mean, whether you could always buy a legal opinion to stating anything you want, and of course, as far as Russell's voting shares were concerned, that was done well before the presidential election. And well, and then there was this lawyer from Philadelphia that he relied on as when he removed 4 directors and appointed 4 new directors of his own. Well, I have a subtitle, in my book called "Shyster Lawyers." Shyster lawyers, and I prove it.
We want everyone to go out and buy your books. We won't give all the details here, but what about the lawyers on the other side, from the opposition to Watchtower?
Well,
12 of them.
I mean, McGee was a Bible student, and he was the absolute star of all lawyers in the Watchtower at the time. He was connected with the district attorney in New Jersey, and Rutherford and Russell and Rutherford and people have consulted him on difficult issues before, and he sided with the directors. He sided with them, and he couldn't gain anything from that. So he must be, I mean, he wasn't their paid lawyer even. He referred them to other lawyers who gave opinions, but he helped them, but he didn't get a penny from that. So McGee is the bright star there, and he was right. And his argument was so solid. I mean, he stated that Rutherford had taken the law into his own hands, an unlawful thing to do.
And before you go on, the actual response that the 4 ousted members gave in their first letter to the brethren at the time, the lawyers, how they wrote it, they didn't say legal opinion. They were basically saying, in respects to Rutherford, it's entirely without warrant. I mean, they're making legal facts, legal statements, not it's our opinion, we think this should be. So that sets it also in a whole other direction.
I have the utmost respect for that statement. It was a lawyer firm that McGee referred them to. He referred them to those lawyers in New York, and their statement is very, very convincing. Very, very convincing, and they stated the same thing as McGee did, that if those 4 were not legal director, nor was Rutherford and Van Amberg and Persson, because they had been elected in exactly the same way. And according to the charter, only directors could be elected to office. Only directors.
In Rud, we haven't even gotten to the Pennsylvania, New York issues of it and whether anything was needed to be started anyway. So this thing gets deeper and deeper.
Really bizarre claims made about just the corporations between New York and Pennsylvania. And it's just one thing after another, multiple lines of evidence showing a premeditation to wrest control of the society.
Right.
And why didn't the opposition continue? If they had the lawyer's opinion, the legal right and opinion, why didn't they pursue it? They could have avoided a lot of damage
Yeah, well, they were going to. I mean, initially they were going to go to the law to use the court, but there was such enormous opposition to this in the movement,
based on the scripture about taking your brother to court.
Yeah,
that was
right.
A lot of what caused all this. If that was put in perspective with legally,
yeah.
won.
But it wasn't a spiritual matter; it was a legal matter.
But they didn't totally see it that way.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
they did. So they considered they were going to sue him, and McGee told them, "Do that, sue him." And they were bent on doing that, but in the end, there was so much opposition from the Watchtower people about this that they decided to, well, we can let we will let the shareholders decide that next election.
And then what did he do with the shareholders?
Where were Moyle and Salter when you needed them?
Pardon?
Where were Moyle and Salter when you needed them?
Moyle and Salter. That's another story.
They could have used them back then in 1917.
Well, Moyle would have been tougher than the directors had been.
Mm-hmm.
And Moyle sued Rutherford and won. And I'm sure that if the directors had taken Rutherford to court, they would have won too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely convinced about that.
So is that the high road spiritually? Is that what they should have done?
Well, it was the movement. I mean, it was not just an offense against another person. It was the whole movement and the will and the wish of that servant. All of them claimed that Russell was that servant, even Rutherford. So it was his arrangement that was at stake. And well, I think the moment they decided not to sue him, they had lost.
Yeah.
Because Rutherford could use all the machinery, the Watchtower and the conventions, and he did to further his case and blacken them. He did that too.
He didn't have any qualms about saying negative things or false things about other people.
No, he lied all the time. I'm demonstrating that in my book, how he lied a number of times, and the worst thing, I think, how could I told you in 1920. He was sick and tired of his own argument that they had to be annually elected. He, of course, then had a set of lawyers come with an opinion that it was something for the membership. It was as a matter of bylaws. It couldn't be bylaws. Bylaws could never correct anything in the charter. Bylaws are always second to the charter. The charter is always number one. So
that's another line of evidence that he did that. He had illegally added bylaws to try and overrun the charter.
And by law, you cannot create bylaws that undermine a specific purpose of a charter and of a corporation.
Yeah, well, and he did that. Yeah, and that he did. It was he did that already in connection with the election in early January 1917. And one of the things that was absolutely contrary to the charter was that people who are turned against the society should not have their votes. Well, the charter said the votes could not be taken back. But in his bylaws that he imposed on on the voting shareholders in January 1917, he introduced that if you go against the society, you will lose your votes, and it's impossible.
What about shareholders and their votes?
Well, the shareholders, they would okay any thing that was put to them, that would be put to them. So, but I mean, this was strictly against the charter, and not only the charter, but the law, the Pennsylvania law too, which I prove. You cannot take away, and that was used later. In the autumn of 1917. Rutherford tried to secure his position by eliminating votes from the opposition, but he didn't succeed.
No. What rights did shareholders have? What did it mean to be a shareholder in the Watchtower?
They had one vote for every $10 they had contributed to the society's work, and they were given one vote for every $10.
Could they sell their votes and get money from those, or sell their shares?
It's not said. They could transfer the votes to someone else. Yes.
But what if they had shares? They didn't get any income from those shares.
No. There was never any income from the shares.
So selling a share would give them nothing.
The only thing they had was voting rights.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But that could be transferred to another person, and that's why Russell had his voting share. Yes,
with the four sisters, correct?
And Rutherford said, "No, you cannot do that, but you could," and the charter said you could. So, but he wanted to. In the autumn of 1917, he wanted to reduce the power of the opposition as much as possible, and if he could remove their rights to vote, that would be good. And you can see that was his attempt, but he didn't succeed with that, because the opposition had McGee, who was a better lawyer than he was, and he saw to it that they had the rights to vote.
I've seen statements Rutherford made about law or certain things, or even about what the United States House of Representatives or Senate had said in regards to flag saluting and things like that. And some of the claims he makes are either bold-faced lies or just he doesn't understand law at all. I mean, it's really, if he was a lawyer, he was a poor lawyer. It looks. And
that was in our neutrality
discussion. He was a very poor lawyer, and I demonstrate that over and over. And one just simple matter. The charter of the Watchtower said that the election would be on the first Saturday each month, on the first month.
Yeah, didn't he arrange both on the same day? Or something. He
arranged the same thing for the People's Pulpit Association.
That's right.
And there was no way that this could happen. They couldn't be in Pittsburgh and in Brooklyn at the same time.
His advice to set up the People's Pulpit was totally non-necessary in itself.
It was not necessary at all.
He didn't understand the law that a Pennsylvania corporation could operate in New York.
Yeah, absolutely, and I demonstrate that. So there was no need for that, and that, of course, shows that his advice had not been professional, and that was an understatement.
And he advised Russell of that, so that was long before probably a possible power play was in motion. That advice was given in 1907. Am I correct on that?
1909.
1909. Okay.
That's when they moved to Brooklyn.
But on the other hand, at that time, there was no way he could think of himself as a future leader.
Mm-hmm. That's the point I was trying to make. So that legal advice was just probably poor legal advice at the time. Hey, we need to set up another corporation.
Right. Yeah. That was very poor legal advice. Very poor legal advice. So he was. Well, at one point I state in my manuscript that he was cut down to sizes, or cut down to size as far as his position as lawyer was cut down to size, and there were nobody of the opposition had any respect for his legal mind. He made so many mistakes about the legal matter, that it's unbelievable how poor his judgment was. If it was a genuine opinion, he could be dishonest too. I mean, so he could just, and he was that too.
Well, if you look at his family history, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there. They had some really interesting family members in that Rutherford family.
Yeah.
We discussed that in the Rutherford death threat, a lot of the family history going on with that.
I think I sent you that letter, Rud, about Rutherford's death threat where his own brother wanted to kill him.
Yeah, and I have brought that from your story and from your documentation. I have brought that into my manuscript.
Oh, thank you.
It is in my biography on Rutherford, how his own brother wanted to. But then on the other hand, he was rather soft about his brother.
Mm-hmm. To his credit, we gave him credit for that.
Yeah, we have to give him credit where credit is due. Mm-hmm. It's not often, but it happens.
And not blindly overlook a lot of blatant, obvious signs of corruption either. You know, you got to be fair.
We have to be fair. I try to be fair. So I have rejected the notion that Rutherford that Russell wanted to get rid of him. There is no evidence of that at all. None whatsoever.
We had a discussion on that, Paul and I. That's the Rutherford death threat, where what we do in that discussion. Okay. Paul and I trace what Rutherford is doing all the way from 1915 to 1916. I can almost trace him week by week through various newspaper reports. And although he's not involved with headquarters of the society, but he's still like chairman at conventions, and he's still very much up front and in charge at the various conventions, giving lectures and his debate and the World's Fair and all of those various things he was doing. But he was still trying to do what Russell wanted. And you see him even traveling with Russell from time to time.
And without that evidence, it is safe to assume and easy to presume that he was ousted, because he disappeared, except within the documentation we showed in the discussion.
Yeah, well, I rejected the notion that Russell renounced him. That is poor reasoning. There are you have to also take into consideration that Rutherford's wife was very sick.
Yes, yeah.
She was ill and needed another climate. So, in my view, that is why they moved to California.
Do you know what she had? What was her illness?
No, I don't know that.
I haven't been able to find that either.
But she lived much longer than Rutherford himself did. So, but that was in the warm climate, and there is one. Did I share with you? There is a letter that Rutherford wrote in 1915 or 16. And how he writes that letter to a brother down in Florida.
Yep, we have that.
And because of his sick wife. So his sick wife was of his concern. And if he had been
go ahead.
Yeah. So and there is also a statement I think it was in 1915 in August or something. There was a convention there, and this Mentor Sturgeon, who was very prominent too, and he had a speech there at the convention that he said that Rutherford would have been chairman now, but he's got a very important cable about business, so he cannot come. And that's, I think, was when he was going for the law office in California.
But even in the 1920s, when he makes the claim, well, a doctor told me because of my health, because of the pneumonia and only one lung, I should move to a warmer climate. Well, that was Dr. Eccles, and he wasn't a doctor. He was a chiropractor. And he was a chiropractor who went to prison for practicing medicine illegally in the state of California.
Yeah, well, I wasn't aware of that, and I haven't dealt it, but I have mentioned those Dr. Eccles. There was one senior, one junior, I think.
I'll send that to you.
Yeah, and I have dealt with that in the Beth Sarim, about Beth Sarim, so yeah, he was, and somewhere along the line there, he must have broken, or his relation with Mary, his wife.
Oh no, his wife died. Rutherford's wife. Dr. Eccles' first wife died of pneumonia during the influenza epidemic.
Oh yeah. Well, you have researched that. I haven't researched those two so-called doctors, but I'm not surprised. So many people died.
But there's so many lines of evidence about this takeover of Rutherford being completely illegal. Dozens of lines of evidence. It's absolutely amazing. Now your book is almost finished, correct? You're about ready.
Yeah, I am dealing with what we call with the final details, the final checkups. Refinements is my word. I refine, and there are 20 sketches or biographies. They are completely completed from my point of view. Only the publishers will, they may have something to say about my phrasing, etc. But Jim Penton has gone, and even Parkinson has gone through them. But they are. I will not work anything on them, and I'm now on all 23 chapters. They are ready, except for I'm going through and refining the footnotes, and I mean to have them compatible with one another. It's what should I say? To have the footnotes in absolute.
The documentation is important.
Yeah, well, they are documented, but there are certain rules.
It's listed, how it's listed.
How it's listed, yes. And but today I'm through chapter 11, and within 2 weeks I should have gone through all the footnotes. And then there is the appendices.
And I thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of the book as well, with the little that I've done. Very little. I really appreciate
it. No, I think what you have done is this matter about Rutherford's brother is, and also that he was poor. I mean, what little money I have, that I quoted from you. What little money I have, he wouldn't like to spend there in that little town.
In Missouri.
And Paul Johnson also said that Rutherford was broke in 1916. And that's make me wonder, I just make me wonder. I haven't stated that, but could this be one reason why he wanted to be connected with the top in the Watchtower? That he had failed as a lawyer in California.
Well, I think he saw the potential of getting people to sell books. He probably went, hey, wait, these people are going out here giving these books away for next to nothing. What if we printed them and then put a profit on it? And they did do that. They didn't. Now they weren't commercially competitive with real commercial books in their defense. However, the volume they did and just getting them out there so cheap did incur tons of revenue. And Jeff and I had this discussion in the Beth Seren thing. Where do you get millions of dollars during the Depression and during other times? So it was a very big thing on his mind right when Russell passed away. Hey, get this 7th volume out there. Go sell this. Print it up. We got to have it quick.
It is a tempting question. It is a tempting thought, but of course, even so, even apart from that, they were so. They thought so much about the end and this book must come out before that. And
others, I think, were thinking that way. And if you want to make money off it, I would capitalize on their fear and produce something for them.
We haven't had our discussion on the finished mystery yet, but the idea of getting it done quickly and who would write it, that was Gertrude Siebert, who did the.
Of course it was her. So much so that Woodworth wrote to her that you are actually the author because you will have to approve it. And then, of course, when she put out that little book on birthdays, and she suggested to Rutherford that she might update the book, and it was rejected. He didn't, and that was because he had other plans then, but
it wasn't going to be a revenue. It wouldn't make a revenue.
Mama, Gertrude Siebert is the only one. She's the one lady of the 20 people I give sketches on. She is the only lady in the company, because there hasn't been anyone apart possibly from Russell's wife, but apart from that, there is no lady who has been as influential as she has been in the Watchtower.
We went to the book, we left off with you in 1974 in your journey.